Hey Titans, this is Mordecai from GamerTitan.com, and in this video we're going to be going over the Properties tab within Core Editor. So let's go ahead and fire up Core here. So as you can see, I have a default project. I believe my editor is in the default view, but just to make sure, I'll go ahead and reset it to default. So this is how your editor should look if you have your view set to default. So as you can see in the bottom right hand corner, currently we have this Properties tab, but there's nothing available to us, and it's because I haven't selected any objects within my game yet. So as an example, if I were to click on the floor here, we can see that this Properties tab now has different values, and you can see that within the viewport I have the floor selected, and within the hierarchy I have my floor selected. So there's a few things here, so let's make this a bit bigger. So the first drop down is called transform. Now this is the values of where your object is in your game, and so it's your position, the rotation of the object, and the scaling. And so as an example, if I just move this floor a bit in the viewport, you can see that as I'm moving it, the position is changing. And so if we go ahead and put this back, we'll go ahead and put this to 0, 0, 0. And that's where the floor defaults to. So now if I were to take an object and drag it into my hierarchy directly, it starts at the 0, 0, 0 in the world. So it should go right in the middle there. So there it is. So if I move it up a bit, you can see it. So it's actually in the floor a bit, so we'll go ahead and move floor down to -50 again. And everything within transform can be copied. And so for example, if I copy this position and then I select my ball here, I can paste the position that I just copied, and it'll move the ball back down because it's -50. Now there is one thing to note here that was a bit confusing to me when I first started with Core. So for example, if we just move the ball over here, we see that its coordinates, its position is right here. Now if I copy this ball's position and I put another ball into the game and then paste the position, it'll go exactly where this ball is. However, if I take the ball and I make it a child of the other ball and then paste the position, it's somewhere else completely. So what's happening here is pretty important. So when you take an object and you make it a child of another object, the parent's object, which is this ball, becomes the 0, 0, 0 position for the object, any child object. So if I were to put this ball back, you can see that my position has changed. So now if I put it back as a child, the position has changed. So this kind of threw me for a loop when I first was messing with Core, because it's not something that is obvious. And so knowing how different objects are nested, so for example this ball is the child of this ball, is important to understand if you plan on using the properties in that way by copying position and stuff like that. And the same thing is true with scale. So if I make 2, you can see that because this ball is a child, it's changing its values, and it's a uniform object, and so it's having to put all the values at 2. And so now as you see, as I'm dragging this around, it's moving this. So that's just a few things to take note on with position, is just making sure that whatever object you plan on manipulating is nested where you think it's going to be nested. And so this helps when you're trying to put a bunch of different objects together and you're trying to adjust the position from another object. So it really helps with kit bashing and making, different objects within Core, but it's also quite confusing if you're not aware that it's happening. So let's go ahead and delete these. We'll just throw a new one into the world. And so this transform property is available for anything that you add into your game. This is always here. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but your Properties tab, based on what you select, different options will appear based on what it is. So as you can see, this is a camera, and so it's got different properties that I can adjust than if I were to select the ball. However, the transform property is always there, so that's something that you'll be seeing quite a bit. Another one that's frequently in most objects that you select is scene. Now, scene has a few interesting things that you can do. So, for example, if I go into my game real quick, we have both visibility and collision set to be on. So that means that I can see this object as a player and I can run into it because it has collision. So as an example, if I turn collision from inherent parent, and I'll explain what that means here in a second, to force off, but I leave visibility on, and then I go back into my game, I can still see the object, but I can run through it because the collision is off. Now the same thing is true with visibility. So if I put collision back on, and I change the visibility to off, if I run straight here, it's kind of hard to notice, but I'm actually hitting the ball. It's because the ball is still there. The collision is turned on. I just am not able to see it as a player. Now, this has a few good use cases that I've recently used, and I'm sure there's many others, but let's go ahead and turn the visibility back on. So as an example, why you would want to use something like that is, say that you wanted to make a wall that was invisible to the players to stop them from going to another point. You could basically put an object within your game, set the visibility to off, and leave collision on, and that would not allow the player to go through that wall, but they wouldn't be able to see it. So I'm sure you've seen that in games before. So explaining the inherent from parent, just as we talked about the transform, if I put another object in space or into my game, right now this ball is not in, it doesn't have a parent at the moment, and so if I leave this on inherent from parent, nothing happens. So if I take this ball and I turn the collision to force off, and then I select this ball and I make it a child of this ball, then because I have collision on inherent from parent and I go into the game, both balls should not have collision on. And it's because this ball right here is getting its collision value from its parent, which is this one right here. And so the same thing is true of visibility. So if I go to the parent object and I go to force off, both will disappear because this one is set to inherit from parent. Now, if I go to force on, this is the child. Only this one can be seen because I've stopped it from inheriting that value from the parent. So we'll turn those both back on. And the other thing you'll see is inherent collision and inherent visibility. I'm not really sure why those checkboxes are there. I think it's just showing that it's inheriting it because it doesn't, it's kind of a weird box, but the real two options within scene is these drop downs here. So another thing that will frequently be in your properties tab is gameplay. Now there's a few things here that these will adjust based on what the object is, but for example, lifespan is how long an object will live within your world in seconds. So if I put 5 to this ball should disappear within 5 seconds. This one should remain there. And nothing's happening. Oh, it's because it's not networked. I see. So let's try that again. And as you can see, the ball disappeared. And so the reason why you would want to use something like that is, for example, if you plan on having something that's spawned, so for example like a health pack that certain types of classes within your game can throw a health pack, it doesn't make sense to just have that health pack exist in your game forever if a player doesn't pick it up. And so as the player casts the health pack, then you can have it exist for like 15 seconds, and if another player doesn't pick it up, then it disappears. The other thing that you can do is you can adjust different objects' team. So for example, if my player was on team 1 and I made this object team 1, you could do different stuff with that. So for example, if an object was on team 1 and the player was on team 1, and I had code set up that only players that shared the same team of this object could run through it, then that would allow you to create something like, once again, like an invisible wall, or maybe like a portal of some sort that the player on opposing factions couldn't run into, or opposing teams I should say, that couldn't run into. And so a use case for that would be if you wanted to make a base that allowed players to spawn in safely that the other team couldn't actually, go in and spawn camp. And so that is where team comes in. And now if you select the object's team and you want it to share that team's color, I'm not sure if this will work. So it will. So it's on team 1, so this object is the blue team. If I switch it should turn red. I'm not sure what the other colors are. I guess it goes back to red and blue, or just red. So as you can see, you can select different objects and make them teams. And so once again, this is helpful if you wanted to make different bases, or if you wanted to make different objects that only certain players on a certain team could interact with and stuff like that. And the same thing is true with these checkboxes. And so as I mentioned, one of the use cases is you could set it so this object only collides with the team, or it only collides with an enemy, etc. And so these different settings are useful because you can manipulate what the object does to different players and different teams. So these 3 properties are usually the defaults, as in you see these a lot in a lot of different things that you select within Core. And so kind of getting used to these is a big deal. So another thing to note, as you can see, there's this revert to default. So instead of just deleting right here, say that I had a value here that I accidentally typed in or it wasn't working out, I could just reset to default. And so if I reset to default, this should go to 000, which it did. And so if you accidentally click on something, you move it and you're not sure where it went, you can just reset it back to where it was. So these other like rendering and base material and stuff like that, these are for mostly objects. And so for example, the rendering is the actual mesh. And so when we selected the object down here, we can see that this is the mesh. So another way to change that, so say that we wanted to change this mesh to something else, we could double click on it, and now we have all of our different meshes. So say that we just made it, let's make it this chest right here. We now changed this one ball to a chest, and we still have show team color, and the chest is, or the ball that is with the mesh of a chest is on team 2, and therefore it is red. So if we turn off use team color, we can see that the color override changes. So the other thing you can do is with objects, there is the materials tab. And so materials are like textures, so if we double click on it, we can change it to like stone. So you can see the outside of it change to stone. Say that we wanted to make it glow, we can make the chest glow. And same thing is true with both sides of the material. So we can see that this, let's turn this off because it's kind of hard to see. Let's make it that. There's another texture with on this mesh, which is wood, and we can change that as well. And so if you're wanting to adjust objects that are already in your world without having to, go to materials and drag it on directly, you could do that by just clicking on the object and doing it within the rendering settings. Now, there's a lot of other settings on each material that allows you to adjust different stuff. So for example, if we wanted to make it green, we can kind of make it green. To really make it green, you'd have to add a new custom material and then click on edit, and then it gives you more options to make adjustments. So if we just make everything green real quick, I can show you. So within your material, how I did that was I made new custom material and then clicked on the edit, and now you can really adjust the textures of this object individually. And the cool thing is about Core is once you create your material, you can save it as well and use it on other stuff. So for example, we just made this custom material, so if I throw it on there, now that custom material is within my game and I can use it on multiple objects within my game. So not trying to get too sidetracked here, but you can see that there's these other properties like physics. Now I only suggest using physics on physics objects within Core, and so for example, if we go to physics, we can add this physical capsule here. Actually, let's do a sphere. That was a little too quick. So we'll move this up into the world, and it has physics enabled. And so what that means is if I start the preview, this sphere will drop to the ground, this one will remain floating in the air, and it's because it has physics enabled, so I can push the object with my player, while this one I cannot. So that's what physics does. You have to do a few things to make it work. So you have to add, for example, this ball has to be in a client context, so you create new client context. Not sure why it's, and there we go. So because it's in a client context, now this chest should have physics on it, and so if I click play, of course that wouldn't work. It's because I didn't check the box. Okay, so as you can see, now I'm able to push this chest around as well. Now the gravity, or the weight of the mass of that object is set to what the sphere would be, so that doesn't look right. So that's kind of a good example. If we go back to this, how I did that was I put the object in a client context, it's networked, and I selected use physics. So we can override the mass of this object, and we can make the mass heavier. It's a little bit too heavy. Click play, and that is still not enough. That's a little bit better. So that's still a pretty light chest, but you can see that this object now has physics enabled and it has a mass. So let's go ahead and just make this 500 real quick. That doesn't seem to be impacting it that well. So as you can see, the angular dampening and linear dampening adjust how slow the object falls and how fast I was pushing it forward. I'm not sure why mass isn't working. If anyone knows, please let me know down in the comments why this is not working as I expected it. And as far as I understand it, this object should be heavier, and I know players are defaulted to, I believe, 100 mass, so this chest should be pretty heavy, and my player is still able to push it just like it was a light object. So I'm not really sure what that's all about. So anyways, back to the properties tab. That's pretty much, each object, like I said, that you select will have different properties, and based on the type of object that it is, the properties that it will have will be different. So another good example would be is if we added a weapon to the game. We can see that we have a few properties now. So because it's a piece of equipment, we have a socket, and the socket allows us to, when a player attaches this equipment, where it will be attached to. So right now it's selected to right prop. So if we click on the game and we pick the gun up, it looks right. So if we were to change this to say upper spine and go back into the game and reattach it, it's attached to my neck. And obviously that doesn't look right, but that's what that setting does. So we'll just put it back. So every piece of equipment that you add has a socket and a pickup trigger. So now, because this is also a weapon, we have different settings for that as well. And so I'm not going to go over all of these, but you can kind of play with them and kind of get a feel for what they do. But a lot of them you can just hover over and they'll tell you what they do, because each of these will be, you know, a lot of this stuff is we'll be saving for another video, for a weapon specific video. But for example, just real quickly, I pick this up and I shoot, it's shooting at 5 bullets per second. So if I go back and change this to 15, press preview, you'll see that the fire rate has increased. And same thing is true with projectile. So on a weapon, you can make it shoot actual projectiles. In this case, this weapon is shooting a generic bullet. We can also make it hit scan, which means that wherever the player is aiming at when they fire, hit scan instantly hits a player. There's a bunch of other settings as far as like the muzzle flashes and stuff like that from effects. And yeah, that's, you know, as you can see, for equipment, there's quite a bit of different settings. And so one other thing I want to mention is if we select another object, we have this add custom properties here. Now this has a bunch of different settings that allows us to add something. So for example, say we wanted to add a vector 3. I'll just make it, just name it custom position. And what this allows us to do is if we are if we're writing a script for this object that we want to be able to manipulate from the properties tab later, instead of writing the position 000 into our code, what we could do is we could take this custom property right here and we could copy it into our code and then reference this value here for when we wanted to make changes. And so for example, if we were to change it to 5 within our properties, our script could automatically take that and use that as the new position. So custom properties are a way to make it so you can add different values to your code, but then have them being manipulated within the properties tab. So that's pretty powerful. Now, to be honest, this video would be like 3 hours long if I were to go through and show every single different type of property and what it does. If that is something that you guys want, or you guys want something more specific, please let me know down in the comments. But I just wanted to explain the main ones for the most part, which you'll see on most objects, and really understanding the nesting of how you set your stuff up within your hierarchy, because it does matter. If something's nested and it has a parent, and for example, like this weapon here has multiple nested objects, and so, you know, even though this weapon is here, this position is nested. So this is where the actual weapon is in the world, and then this is the rifle's position from that center position of the weapon. And so really understanding that was the main thing, because that is what messed me up a lot, and then kind of understanding collision, visibility, and stuff like that. So hopefully this video was helpful. I know it is extremely basic and a little bit all over the place. I apologize for that. Like I said, if you guys have any questions, please leave them in the comments down below. I will also be having a video that goes more in depth about weapons. That's why I just kind of briefly spoke about the equipment options and stuff like that. As we make videos on the various different asset types that you can have within Core, we'll deep dive into those properties of each one. But yeah, hope you guys enjoy creating with Core. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up button, leave a comment down below, and if you want more Core videos, please hit that subscribe button.